Say hi to the esteemed panel. Good evening, everyone. How you doing? So I don't know what's better, getting you guys after lunch or right after drinks? After drinks, I feel like you guys are going to be a more lively bunch now, right? I feel like it. I see people in here that I did not see before, so that is good. Welcome to our awesome panel of experts. We're going to be talking about a very important topic, one that has not been talked about much recently. Java, Log4j, just Log4Shell, whatever you want to call it. No one's talking about it. We decided we're going to tackle this very, very difficult conversation today because there's not a blog about this anywhere. So if you Google it, I think there's more entries on Log4j at this point than anything else. Yeah, ton of it. All right, let me introduce the panel before we get into our topic of the day. I'll start with farthest away, Mr. Daniel Sergile. He's the virtual CISO over at Unit 42 at Palo Alto Networks, formerly the Deputy CISO at Ciox, and just an overall avid hunter. And he drinks Corona beer. Just for anyone who's wondering, if you want to get him a drink while we're on the panel, it's the Rona and it's the Delta version. All right, so it's the Delta variant that he drinks. Wes Knight, who's with us as well, 12 years as a CISO, Wes, and now you're with Needle. Yeah, so thank you for, yeah, you needle people. You do. Klint Walker, he represents the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency that has been just stellar when it comes to this recent vulnerability. Really, Director Easterly has done an unbelievable job. And Derek Johnson, who is on the board at InfraGard here in Atlanta. Thank you all for being here. So I'm gonna hand you the mic, and we'll start with you, Derek, by default. Okay, so it seems like every year, just around December, we tend to get a rude awakening that cybersecurity people don't get standard vacations. We're kind of like retail employees in IT, right? Like everyone works through Christmas so we can take vacation in January where no one's around. It seems like security people have the same thing. Let's talk about what's so dangerous about this current vulnerability than maybe a lot of the other ones, because it is very, very significant. Derek?
Good point. So one thing, hopefully I'm not reverberating either, but one thing, I'm with Susan G. Komen, and I'm Senior Director of IT Infrastructure, but I also own the cybersecurity side, and it's not for profit. So what's interesting is I've never been in a not-for-profit until this year. I've been primarily for profit. It's just a different mindset, but they are heightening in awareness in terms of security for the first time, I think, ever. What's interesting as the last few days about this particular incident is that it crosses all types of products, services, service offerings, right? If you go to GitHub, you can just take a look at their repository. Everything from Cisco, Azar, AWS, Sophos, I mean, the list goes on and on because it's a utility that most of these companies are using through some other type of product or service. So that's what makes it, I think, in my opinion, one of the most devastating impacts other than the SolarWinds, which everybody had that particular product. Everybody at some point has Microsoft, AWS, Cisco, Sophos, McAfee, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and whether directly or indirectly you do have it, Klint, what can you tell us?
So I would like to say that, first of all, you can probably blame me because this happens every time I try and take a vacation, whether I take it in March or whether I take it in December. I keep telling them if I take vacation, something bad happens. They don't believe me. So exactly what he was saying is that because of the number of devices, that we have, I mean, that's really what the big thing is. So you imagine you have all these Internet of Things and devices that are there, and these devices all have this embedded into it. How do you patch something that doesn't really have a firmware that can support a patch? You know, how do you even know that you have these? It's been weaponized at this point, but the weaponized is really for the external facing stuff. What they're concerned about is that somebody will be able to do... Check. All right. So what they're worried about is that somebody is going to be able to do a worm that can then propagate itself using this vulnerability to stretch from one organization to another. Because guess what? We're all interconnected now. We've all talked about this supply chain. And imagine that your camera systems or that some IoT device, whether it be a keyboard and mouse or whether it's anything that's out there, is being able to propagate this and have it worm through different environments. So that's what they're worried about, is even though it's been weaponized now, we don't think we've seen its full weaponized potential. And that's why the GitHub thing is out there, why the Department of Homeland Security and CISA has created that GitHub repository to start identifying and showing all of these places or all of these devices that are susceptible to this, which ones can be patched, which ones can't be patched, and how you need to go out there and find those and remediate them, or find some other method of getting them off your network or segmenting them so that they can't cause any damage.
First, I want to officially make a request. You notify me when you're going on vacation. I've said this a couple of times today talking to different people about this subject, and I'm just going to repeat it now. I apologize to those of you who've heard it already. We used to make cracks about the space program back in the 80s and 90s. Do you want to go to the moon on a rocket built by 2 million lowest bidders? And the answer obviously is no. But IT's found itself in that same situation today. We have become dependent upon these little open source APIs like Log4j that have been embedded in so many things we can't keep track of them anymore. You've embedded it in your program, and they've embedded it in this program, and then I buy this program. I don't know this thing's back in there. And it's made the landscape, the scope of the problem so immense that it's very, very difficult for anybody in the information security world, CISO or otherwise, to have a handle on what the dangers are. It's really just got to get to the point where it's scary. I've been doing this a long time, as James pointed out earlier. I was CISO at Department of Revenue for 12 years, and I'm at Needling now, but I've never seen anything quite like this, where this has gotten to the point where you just can't trust any of the softwares. We talk about zero trust periodically, but it's gotten to that point. You just don't know what you're buying. In the South, we have an expression, buying a pig in a poke. And that's kind of what we've ended up with a lot of the software today.
Thanks. So some of the things that we've been seeing at Unit 42, and let me tell you, Friday was a very interesting day because, it kind of started off with everybody looking forward to the weekend, and that just got all blown to hell. So when we take a look at Log4j, right, let's take a look at some of the underlying architectures, especially the main ones that are used. So for those that use Spring Boot, which is, by the way, almost, let's call it 80+% of all the containers built within AWS uses the Spring Boot framework. It's the #1 framework used for building containers, and Log4j, depending on how you actually put that in, is part of that, right? So you got AWS environments that are highly susceptible. As the weekend progressed, we put some information out there as far as the different technologies, right? And and it was brought up earlier about Cisco, VMware, all these technologies that do use this open source software as part of the technology stack. What we ended up seeing is the folks that are running the ransomware gangs and all these different crypto malware groups actually attacking over the weekend with Log4j, being able to spread their ransomware and crypto ransomware in environments relatively easy. If you take a look at some of the logs that were coming in from customers and from people that I know, their logs were getting filled up within hours on Saturday. Just absolutely, the attacks were nonstop and continuous. Part of it is, it's dead simple to do. The other part is, it started off with, we had one proof of concept, now we have 6 of them, and each one is completely different. So, vendors are scrambling like crazy to upgrade, update their defenses. The customers are scrambling like crazy to get those put into place. They're having a hard time identifying a lot of the infrastructure that actually has that on there. Because let me just ask you this. Who here has a complete list of open source software within their enterprise environment? I don't expect a single hand to go up, and that's really what it boils down to, right? We trust very much to what Wes was talking about, that what a vendor produces or what we pull off GitHub is going to be something that's trustworthy. I don't need to know what it has in it. I just need to know that it works, and it works in my environment. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it from GitHub. I'm going to trust this vendor to go ahead and give me a piece of technology, or not give, but buy a piece of technology from a vendor and put it in place. And it's not until you have this kind of, tectonic shifting event, you have this aha moment where you're like, I may want to get a good grasp of what the underpinning and subsystems are in a lot of my environment. And that's what a lot of folks are struggling with, is the identification of what all has Log4j in it.
Keep the mic. Can we turn this one on? Yeah, give me, yeah, so that way, keep the mic for a second. Yeah. And so,
Could I chime in just real fast?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say, I really want to hit home on that point there, is knowing what you have in your environment. We've been talking internally about this, and one of the analogies that we use is, imagine that we came to you and we said, hey, something's going on with batteries, and batteries are exploding and causing people's homes to catch on fire. And then we say, oh, we know that this is AA batteries. Do you know off the top of your head where every AA battery is in your house? And that's kind of what we're facing here with this Log4j, is, do you really know every device that has this? Do you have a way of finding every device? You might know, hey, quickly my remote control has it, maybe my Xbox controller, but do you really know where every AA battery is in your house? And as he was saying, we've taken it for granted that people can give us a finished product that's something we can just plug and play, and we no longer know what makes it tick. We no longer know what vulnerability it's really putting in that supply chain. We're going to hit on that a lot. That supply chain is what we're talking about, is how do you trust all the people that you do business with? Sorry, I just wanted to foot stomp that one real fast.
No. That's an absolutely great point, and that kind of leads me to my next question, which is, we all don't have proper visibility and inventory. I think that's fairly clear. I think that the big difference with this one, with Log4j right now from anything else, is one, the visibility aspect of it is. The other one is there's now an additional patch. So now there's like version 2.16. So the original patch that came out on, I believe, Sunday is now no longer valid because of the proof of concepts that we're seeing, which kind of leads to what I like to consider to be an unprecedented time, where we're rushing these patches, and I'm just going to put money on something here, all right? You guys all heard it here in the stream, listen to it. The AWS and Okta going down today wasn't coincidental. That's someone patching something that they shouldn't have patched on prod because of Log4j. So, Mr. Unit 42, what are some of the fundamentals we need to make to start really properly investigating and mitigating Log4j?
Well, wow, that's hot. Part of the problem is a lot of people are behind the eight ball right now, right? And are kind of going through a manual paper chase of looking into their systems. They don't have a technology or some kind of way to scan for that. Actually, just in the last day, there's been a few scanners that have been put out that will allow you to identify Log4j in your environment. But when we take a look at just the basics, right, and this isn't even cyber hygiene basics, this is just basics IT, CMDBs, I know it sounds passé and super old hat and stuff like that, but I bet a lot of people wish they had one that was very detailed right now. But from that fact, Jay, sorry, from that fact, yeah, so they're playing whack-a-mole at this point. The proof of concepts, like I said, there was one or two on Friday, and then it kind of grew to 6 by Sunday evening, and there's even more coming out now. It's truly knowing your environment. And at the end of the day, most companies, if you think about what's happening right now, you have the holiday breaks coming in, you have data center freezes happening, you have everybody in the enterprise trying to finish out the last of their yearly projects so they can make bonus or meet their objectives for the year. And all of a sudden here comes Log4j just saying, hold on, I'm going to take care of this for you real quick. it makes it very difficult because, on a lot of these projects that enterprises are putting out, they now have to go in and fix something brand new that they put into place. So as far as like finding stuff and how you identify, it really depends on company to company based on the resources that you have for being able to inspect those areas, right? So if you were, it's a lot easier for me to say in the cloud, you can actually go through and take a look at your container sets based on your Jenkins builds and your playbooks, see what the underlying subsystems are there, and relatively easy to identify that. But where a lot of companies drop into issues is, legacy systems or systems where, especially with the Great Resignation, they're calling it?
Yep.
Okay. A lot of the folks that supported that or built it are no longer there. So it's literally a hunt to see what is in the underlying system.
So before Wes addresses this, I want to ask in the room, how many of you guys have all the right notes on your developer notes in your CI/CD, platform, so that you see all the code notes, so you know what's in what? I'm just asking. Maybe I'm looking for a unicorn, and
Are you setting this up for me? Because I promise not to make a vendor pitch here. That's awesome though.
Well, does it matter?
Yes, it does. Because if newer companies, newer products may have that, where you may not have it for something that you're still supporting for 20 years old, that your company has acquired through acquisitions and mergers and things like that.
So the people in the live stream can't hear what you just said, so I want to repeat what you said, and then I'm gonna and then we'll kind of answer it. Summarizing what someone respected in our audience just said is, he goes, well, it does make a difference if a company's 20 years old or inherited a product that doesn't have all the code notes in it. That would make a difference. Anyone here work in a startup? Company that's 3 years or younger? Anyone? Anyone consult to a startup that's 3 years or younger?
Yes.
So, Mr. Sergile, grace us, please, with your wisdom.
So, you're absolutely right. 20 years mergers and acquisitions, not quite understanding what was acquired because you had 3 days worth of due diligence to be able to complete the merger or the acquisition. It makes it extremely difficult. It's kind of finding that proverbial needle in a haystack if it's 20 years old. Even if it's 3 years old, if you think about all the hot fixes and changes and feature enhancements that go into a product within 3 years, the possibility of having a bad piece of software that 3 years down the road causes an issue versus today, at the time that you put it in, you don't see that in the future. And I mean, the basic question is, how many people in IT document well and enjoy it? Y'all all should be laughing. God. Anyway, the answer is nobody does, right? So unless there's a built-in process or you have a tool that will actually do it for you, and you can actually go in and pull that information out relatively easily and quickly, it's going to be a hard grind finding release notes, right? I mean, you may be able to look in Confluence, you may be able to look in, Jira, maybe something in there will say what the subsystems are, but that's low-hanging fruit. I'm going to start there. The real trudge, that's just the tip of the iceberg. The rest of the iceberg is still there, right? So,
yeah. Wes, what kind of fundamental changes do we need to see based on Log4j?
I think one of the big issues that this brings to light is our fundamental problems with the supply chain, just totally. We don't have a good way to check on the people in our supply chain. If you go to them with security questions, you get a lot of pushback. Or you had mentioned this earlier about the SOC report. You get a SOC report. Right?
SOC 2.
SOC 2.
The SOC 2 cartel.
So we just don't have a good way to track that. and be able to control what our suppliers are doing to us. You guys that know me, I do a lot of work with CMMC and assessments and stuff like that. That's what the whole point of that is the supply chain for DoD. They're trying to kind of get a grip on it because they don't have a grip currently, but I think across the board, we don't have a grip on our supply chain. You know, we've got to do the basic, somebody said earlier, blocking and tackling today. You know, we've got to have an asset list. We've got to have patch management. We've got to have change management. We've got to have all those things to cover the stuff that we can cover so that when something like this happens to us, it comes up through the supply chain, we're probably in a little better situation to deal with it.
Yeah, Klint?
Yeah.
So let me ask you something a little different, Klint. And this is specifically around CISA and what Director Easterly has done since this has happened. For those who don't know, I've actually kept track of this. Director Easterly of CISA has been on a total of 27 different television interviews speaking to that target specifically executives and leaders within companies talking about the significance of Log4j. 27. Her predecessor at best did 3.
And that just really shows you how much of an issue we think that this is. I mean, and I can't stress that enough, that this isn't going to happen because CISA did something about it. You know, this is going to happen because we did something about it. And that's what Director Easterly is trying to change, is that we're not here to do everything for everybody. We can't do that, that this is a team effort. And you're the team, you know, you're what we're relying on. We need your input. We need you to follow the steps that we set out or to give us things that we can't see. You know, you're the experts. You're the ones that we're relying on to kind of make all of this happen. And it's to take quick and actionable action, you know, and that's what I want. That's what really I'm here to talk about, you know, is think about it. It's the holiday season, you know. I'm sorry I started all this because technically my vacation started on Friday. But, you know, your people just want to go home. They want to have their Christmas too. So imagine that you say, hey, I want you to go and check and see, you know, whether we're vulnerable to this Log4j. They're going to run a quick scan on probably known servers, and they're going to say, nope, we're good. Let's walk home. Let's go home. And we really need it not to be that kind of response. We need it to be, hey, this is a very serious thing. We need people to go in and act like this isn't the Christmas break. You're going to have to ask people to work those long hours. You're going to have to ask them to do their due diligence. Are we really susceptible here? We need you to check every device. We need you to run all the scanners because we need you to keep up on the current news. We need you to keep visiting the pages to say, hey, here's the new version that's out, or here's some new more information, because this continues to evolve. It's not one of those things where it's, oh, this was a quick and easy, we were able to identify it, we can move on. I hate to say it, but this is like COVID. It's going to continue to adapt. It's going to continue to expand.
Right, this is endemic. Yeah.
Yes. And this is just the tip of the iceberg when you look at it. I mean, is that this is the new norm, I think. You talked about the transforming CISO. Well, this is part of the transforming CISO, is that our threats are no longer going to be one and dones. We can create a patch and move on. It's going to be an ever-evolving evolution of how do we protect our supply chain. We can't just defend our own kingdoms anymore. We have to defend the kingdom next to us as well. You know, we have to keep that going down the line, but we also have to hold accountable the people who are giving us these products, saying, hey, I need you to show me everything that's part of this. My first mentor when I took over as a CISO a long time ago, he said, every piece of software that comes into your environment, every appliance that you allow in, that's a Trojan horse. Yes, it does something, it might look nice in your basement or hanging up on the wall, but it's got all these little bugs in it, all these little Spartans ready to jump out and, you know, do damage to you. So just keep that in mind, and that's really what we're facing here is, are you really aware of what's coming in with every device, every appliance, every silver bullet that you're letting in to do something miraculous for your business? Do you really know what's in there? And are you prepared to put security people to it? Do you have enough security people to it? How do you link up with everybody else, you know, to get the help that you need when you need it? How do you bring surge support in December? You might need surge to help you overcome this today. Do you know who to talk to in this room to bring that surge support to you? Who has the expertise, who has the tools, the abilities? You know, because that's where you need to go. We at CISA, we can point out what the problem is, we can help you find the information, but we can't solve it for you. All we can do is help you or point you toward the vendors that can. And all those vendors are sitting right around you today, some of them up on this panel even, so.
Yeah, if you look at the CISA page dedicated just for this, it updates, I think, 6, 7, 8, maybe even 10 times a day with new information, which is phenomenal considering the fact they're a government agency. Phenomenal. Like, might be the best oiled government agency in our government at this point.
So I can tell you that they have kept trying to pull me off of vacation in order to keep abreast of this, and I kept telling them I'm on vacation. But no, I've been, just like everybody else, I was studying this all weekend. I was getting briefed on my drive up here today. We were sitting in on meetings. We literally have about 8 to 10 meetings a day just on this one topic, starting Friday of last week throughout the weekend. Every single CSA, every single cyber person up at headquarters, we've been working this nonstop since it happened, and it's not us, it's actually all of you, it's all the vendors out there that are supporting this as well. They've been tirelessly going at it. But it's going to come down to, just like we always say, the patches will be out there, but are you actually going to patch? Are you going to take the time and effort to put the ball in the end zone? Because we've thrown the Hail Mary up there. It's up to you to catch it and put your feet down in the touchdown. So,
Derek, what fundamental changes from a supply chain perspective do we need to enact to really start to gain this visibility and make sure we're not, astute to these types of threats anymore?
Yeah, so one of the things I think that's going to have to fundamentally change is just kind of a culture and behavioral change throughout various industries. How everybody was trying to, I got to have my balance sheet bigger than yours, right? That's just American way, and I gotta have a better go-to-market. So we throw these things in there to make things faster, even though we're leveraging the same type of open source. But at some point, just like there's other consortiums for the industry, industrial Internet of Things, there's consortiums to try to mandate how that will be operated and that will be configured and secured. We need to start looking back and stepping back and says, hey, if we're gonna have something like open source that a majority of us are gonna use, how are we going to actually make that secure? Is whatever the companies that the director of CISO went to, say, you guys need to start, a few of you, start some type of consortium, change the cultural behavior. It's not always about your balance sheet being bigger than the other. And take a look and take a step back, figure out these types of supply chain, these open source things, are they secure? And doing a proof of concept, and then saying, hey, the other Fortune 1000, the Fortune 500s, the smaller, the nonprofits, you guys should be able to use this now. And we've got to take that, they got to make an investment to change that culture and that behavior, in my opinion. Yeah,
there's a lot to be said about that. I think I want to really quick ask you guys, and I'll start with you, Derek. We look at Log4j, and we can go back last year to SolarWinds, and there's fundamental changes between both. I think Log4j, like you said, you couldn't have said it any better, Klint. It's very endemic. This is not going to end. I think SolarWinds is also very endemic. I think the fact that the Chinese and Russians were able to study the Microsoft source code explains the quadruple amount of patches that are coming out of Microsoft every month. Looking at our supply chain, though, what are some of the things maybe as an industry we can start to drive to really create that transparency? Do you think we need a kind of like a software bill of materials on every single thing we put in our environments going forward?
I think there needs to be some financial repercussions in terms of whatever kind of levies and things like that, right? So let's take the supply chain with chips. We don't manufacture chips in the U.S. anymore, right?
Right.
So if you have a problem with those chips or something to that effect with some kind of bug in it, wherever they're coming from, we should levy that as a country.
That's China.
Right. You should levy financial impact, right? Those kinds of things, to me, some of the only way you'll make that material change, because people are only going to take heed when they're impacted in their wallet.
Yeah. Klint, what do you think?
I think when you go to the supermarket, you look at that can of soup and it says, here's all the ingredients that are in this can of soup. I think that's almost what we're to, is, here are all the libraries that you're going to use. Here's all the makeup of this particular product. Because as a cybersecurity person, how do you create a strategy when you don't know what you're creating a strategy for? How do you patch a camera system? How do you patch an elevator system? Because we no longer have this separation between IT systems and OT systems, and the vulnerability exists on both sides of the house, how do you really leverage your team in order to deal with that? How do you know whether there's going to be a kinetic effect or whether it's going to be a pure cyber effect from whatever vulnerability is exploited? Do you look at the downstream impact? So I think until we can understand as cybersecurity professionals what the makeup of something is, and organizations have to be able to give that to you, saying here's everything that's in here so that you know, when a new vulnerability comes out or there's a new patch released, hey, this is what I have to deploy. This is the number of people. Because every time I go into an organization, as we do our assessments for these places, most of them say, here's my patch team, and it's one person, And it's like, how do you, as we've added more and more devices, so we had IT devices first, then we had networking devices, and then we had, OT devices, now we have the Internet of Things, and yet the patch person is still one person. So you've quadrupled the amount of work that this person does, but it's still just one person. You might have given them a tool to help them out, but patching has to become to the forefront, and you don't know what to patch if you don't know what's in it.
How many people here have, by a show of hands, please, patch committees? Anyone? Patch what? A patch committee? Like a vulnerability management patch committee? People who review patches and, okay, so the state of our republic is horrible. All right, Wes, please, same question.
Well, I think this is true. We've got to have the list of ingredients so we know what's there, but kind of from a practical standpoint, that scares me because you were talking about quadrupling things a minute ago. I think we just went up by a factor of 100 on the things we've got to look at now. And are we going to have the ability to do that? I guess there'll be a way to automate that, somehow or another. But at the same token, it's just the volume of data as a information security group we'd have to look at. That's just scary. It really is.
Yeah, Mr. Sergile, go ahead, please.
So I've got a unique perspective on this, not because I work for Palo, but prior to Palo, I worked for a company that was a SaaS vendor for the medical industry. And I don't know how many MSAs I ran across where they would ask about indemnification from open source software that you might be using or giving to them that they are not licensed for, and that indemnity would come back to us. Now, compound that with trade secrets and proprietary, how we use that special sauce. Most companies are going to be reluctant to kind of give partial blueprints to what is their IP. Even though it is an open source piece of software, how they use it is not, right? So from that standpoint, I'd throw it on its end. And I'm not saying that what you're saying is knee-jerk, but when it comes to 0 day, I don't care if you know what's in your stuff, you're still in the same boat.
No, but there's a big difference here. Let me debate you on this one because you're
Okay.
wrong. Clearly wrong. All right. When it comes to a 0 day, it doesn't matter. But if I know it's in my environment, I can make the right business decision of how I operate the specific pieces of software that are victims or exposed to that specific 0 day. The problem we have today with Log4j is you don't know what exists in your environment until either one, your vendor says it does, right? So your vendor sends you an email and goes, hey, Stan, how's it going? You know that Log4j thing? Yeah, well, it's just so happened that 17 years ago, we had a developer who is no longer with us, but he put Log4j in one of our key pieces of technology that we haven't updated in 17 years. And it happens to run the entire engine of our software, and you're exposed to the 0 day. But we haven't been able to know this because, we've got 17 million lines of code, and we can't possibly know that.
All right, you need to stop now. Anywho, so what I was trying to say before you told me you were right is when we flip it on its ass end, what we should do is hold the vendors accountable to own up to whether they have a piece of software in their code that is susceptible. Like, not to toot Palo's horn, but if you go on to Palo Alto, they have a list of what is affected by Log4j. By the way, none. But I guess my point is, it's going to be very tough for vendors, and that this doesn't even include the insanity that is enterprise development, right? Because different Scrum teams, people leave, products come, products go. There's hotfix to fix a hotfix to something that broke. There's a ton of stuff there that is being used in-house. That's just outside of the supply chain, right? So you want to hold vendors accountable? Absolutely. Hold them accountable to notify you instantly.
Okay.
Perfect example, in the first 24 hours,
Hang on.
you knew what was susceptible.
Anyone know within the first 24 hours if they're a victim of anything? No. So we're setting an unrealistic deadline to try to squeeze money out of a company. Anyone here work for a SaaS or AS or PaaS provider? Anyone? I'm sorry. Yeah, okay, most of you do.
Half this room.
Yeah. So anyone here know their entire software supply chain that they can tell it to a customer on the phone? Yeah, not a hand in sight. And I guarantee you if I ask Kim, how many people online voted for this one, it'd be 0 as well. Because no one knows, right? And 24 hours is not enough time because most people don't even have visibility into their own environment on stuff that's old to begin with, right? I mean, this is just very, very difficult, and I think it's showing the. I hope that the conversation at the end of this isn't how do we not have this happen again, but it's like, you know what we should do? We should probably get visibility to everything we have that runs everywhere.
Absolutely. I think companies need to understand what's in their environment, what they've put into their environment, developed in their environment, but also what they put into their environment via, having a complete software inventory list. I don't know how many times we did software scans and it's like, wait, when did we get this? Oh, so-and-so, Shadow IT, dropped a credit card. Now we're in XYZ SaaS provider, because that never happens, always. But my point is so there's two aspects of it. One is getting a hold of your own environment with process and possibly technology, but on the vendor front as well, yeah, absolutely hold them accountable. I don't disagree with that statement at all. The question is, how do you do it in a way that doesn't drive prices through the roof? And
here's an interesting question for the panel. Do we incentivize or punish someone?
Incentivize.
Yes.
I think this question's been going on for as long as there's been IT, is who has the onus of responsibility for security? Is it the person who implements it, the person who bought it, or the person who developed it? Who do you hold accountable in that scenario? And
the person who voted for it.
Yeah. There's got to be accountability at every level, and that's the thing, is where do you draw the lines on that? Yes, you need to incentivize, but there also has to be, the carrot and the stick. I think on all three of those areas, on the people who developed it, the people who bought it, and then the people who implemented it, all need to be held accountable for their role. And I think that's where the CISO role really sits, is, trying to help figure all of that out. What was the business need? How was it developed? Did we do our due diligence in looking at the right product to put into our environment? Knowing how what manpower we have in order to patch it, in order to maintain it, and to segment it, to do all this stuff. And then how are we actually using it? Are we using it in line with how it was developed, or did we try and make a helicopter fly underwater? So.
Derek, you said punish. So are we talking like Saudi Arabia type of punishment, like chopping off hands? We talking like congressional punishment where your stock portfolio increases by 800%? Which kind of punishment are we talking about?
So being in the U.S., it's all about financial punishment, right?
Okay.
Because if you look at the database and you look at the vendors that are listed, not all of the vendor products are affected, right? So it says, let's just take vendor X. They have 10 products. They may have 6 or 5 that are affected, and the rest are not. So what does that tell you? To me, they decided they were going to use this particular product, this open source product, for these products. So, and the people that they have developing is under their regime, right?
Yeah.
So not necessarily, and usually it's implemented by a reseller who doesn't know that level of information, and it's not going to be the buyer who knows that level of information. So if company X has 4 or 5, then now they should be obligated, going forward, they should be making sure everything's secure by design. Because if I don't, and I have something like this, I'm going to get financially punished on this repercussion. So it's again, they decided some of the products they use it and some of them don't. Doesn't mean, so there may be some other Log4, whatever the case may be, something else, that they need to do it by security by design. And going forward, if it's not, then they get punished.
I'm going to kick it to you here in just a minute, Daniel. I do want to kind of ask this question of the audience. How many of you guys believe we should incentivize? Show of hands, please. All right. Sure. So what I'm asking our audience is, in the event of a supply chain like what we're looking at with Log4j or what we looked at with SolarWinds or anything else, should we do one of two things? Should we incentivize or punish the company who is essentially responsible for the vulnerability? How many believe we should incentivize them to do the right thing? How many believe we should punish? It's kind of like zero trust.
So let me throw this one in there. Log4j, right? Not everybody that has Log4j is susceptible. Why? Because of the configuration.
Natural immunity?
Huh?
Natural immunity?
Nice. I like how you threw that political segue in there. Anyway, it's because of the way you configured it, right? At the end of the day, just because it has Log4j in there doesn't mean you're gonna get hacked with Log4j. It has to be configured a specific way. It has to be turned on to begin with, right?
Right.
So who gets punished in that scenario?
So
Oh no, so if I give you a set of products and I have a warranty that says, I'm giving you this, it has the capability to do this, here are the features that you can turn on. Manufacturer didn't give it to you turned on, but you turned it on. I'm not wordsmithing. Read any MSA, you'll see a warranty in there.
These are the best panels. Have you guys heard that no one here said, yeah, I agree with what he said? We've been doing this for 45 minutes. Not one person here said, I agree. This is a good panel. All right, this is phenomenal. The last panel of the year at FutureCon, and we're killing it because that's what the future should look like, right? A panel of diverse thoughts. So let me ask you this.
I think we should work together, vendors, government body agencies, private enterprise, to come up with an actual solution that isn't a paper tiger. And by the way, the fines, are you kidding me? You're going to give $1 billion company a what? Let's call it $250,000 fine.
So GDPR was that, right?
Yeah,
GDPR.
exactly. You know exactly
GDPR was the punishment piece, right? You don't treat data right, we're going to fine you.
Here's
And
25,000 euros.
Yeah, here's. Well, no, what was it? The UK fined Facebook like $5 billion, and that's like their daily intake. In the EU, they're like, hey, you're so bad, we're going to fine you one day to pay for all the shit we can't pay for because, well, we're just not very good at what we do. So, yeah, I'm against fines. We're going to get to questions in just a minute, I promise you. There's one final thing here I want to ask the panel, then we're going to open this up to questions. So this year started off very interesting. I'm going to summarize. This is the last event of the year, right? Anyone attending any other event outside of Christmas or holiday parties to get drunk at all? No. All right, so this is our last cyber event for the year until we come back after the holidays and in January. So I'm going to summarize 2021 for you without the C word, okay? Promise I will not drop the C word. It started with SolarWinds, and December of last year, we all kind of went on holiday, and if you weren't a SolarWinds customer, you were like, we're good. Right? Come January, Microsoft comes out and goes, a bunch of Chinese and Russian looked at our source code extensively for about the last 15 months or so. So in dog years, that's a lifetime. March, we have all the Microsoft Exchange vulnerabilities that completely paralyze every single 70% of the US organizations. We continue to go with supply chain, Kaseya, ransomware, and we're ending the year with this beautiful, like, unprecedented kind of like, you know, just Log4j. How would you summarize this year in a sentence, Mr. Sergile?
I haven't slept since 2019.
What he said. I just want to make a point real quick, and this will date me to a big degree, but in 1985, I was region support specialist for IBM, The computer that I was a specialist on was the one that ran the shuttle. My watch has more storage in it than that computer did. In 2000, I was working for Microsoft when Windows 2000 Server came out. The project manager told me that if they were doing Six Sigma programming, there would still be hundreds of errors in that code. We're 22 years later. It's
21 and
20
like 21 and like 0.9.
It's just gotten worse. The landscape has gotten wider and deeper. And I think this year has been a good example of what that has brought us. And next year, I don't know, probably similar things. We just have to stay vigilant and alert and just, like I said, stay with the basics and see where we can go.
So Klint, we know that you can't go on vacation next year.
Yeah, no.
I try not to take vacation. I love my job. I would actually do this all day, every day. I mean, I was coming here to a cyber conference on my vacation before they asked me to speak on this panel just because I enjoy this sort of thing. I enjoy all of you. But I mean, what we're really seeing, I think you touched on it, you're talking about CISOs that are now, answering directly to the CEO, this year was eye-opening, I think, for the general public to realize that we live in a world of digital reliance. We can no longer think that we can move back to a pen and paper way of doing things. I go to places all the time and they're like, oh, if we ever get hit by ransomware, we'll just go back to the pen and paper, way of doing things. We'll take orders the old-fashioned way. And a couple of those organizations called me up and said, hey, Klint, we got hit with ransomware. We tried to go back to pen and paper and we realized that everybody who knew how to do that retired 2 years ago. None of our people know how to go back to pen and paper. We can't operate the way that we used to. We all think that we can, but we've become so reliant on our digital assets that we're all interconnected now that there's no way that we can do this anymore. We can't bury our head in the sand and hope that it goes away. We can't say, hey, just because we're not a SolarWinds customer doesn't mean we're not going to have a SolarWinds impact, as you pointed out. It's a cascading effect. It's that domino effect that every time even the smallest thing happens, a butterfly flaps its wings all the way across the world, we have a cyber incident here in America. That's just the way that things are. You have to keep your eye, as a CISO, you have to keep your eye on every little event that happens and saying, how can this come back and affect me? Does it affect somebody downstream from me in my supply chain? Does it affect somebody upstream because I'm passing it along to them? I mean, that was what this year really taught me, is every partner I've talked to, they said, I am now got that ear of my CEO or my COO where they realize that they cannot operate without me. That IT is the cornerstone for everything that we do. And I think you're going to start seeing the shift in the years coming. At least I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that shift comes with money and resources. But here's the other thing, is there's not enough talented people to do what we do. Every single one of you in this room is a unicorn. You're worth your weight in gold at this point in time. That's why managed service providers are so important, because they can at least get the people and offer that service out to a wide variety of places. But that was what this year meant to me. It's just, I think it's only going to get worse from the number of vulnerabilities that we see moving forward. But I think that we all realize now that we can't just bury our head in the sand. So I think they're going to see the people standing up and saying, hey, let's fight this. How do we move forward with this? And I think that this is the turning point. This is where we'll say that, hey, this is where digital and security became real for everybody, not just for those of us who do it for a living.
I would conclude like this, to Klint's point, there needs to be a bigger investment in people in terms of education and awareness around the people that are in security. So, right, most of us, like me, we started as IT engineers, right, and maybe building a firewall, router, switches, and you kind of morphed into what was then information security that's now cyber. We're so digitally interconnected now that actually, in a lot of companies, like the company I work for, a not-for-profit, we're fully remote workforce, right? Mm-hmm. And the reality is we don't even use the data center that much. We're mostly cloud. So what does that mean? That means you really got to focus on security and around your data, around your service providers, and it's, there should be more of an emphasis around security practitioners and security acumen than the traditional IT acumen. Yep. That should be it going forward. So as IT used to be up on this pedestal with, the 2 and 3 data centers in the US and around the world, and that's going away, you need to start focusing and shifting those resources and that knowledge to people around security and risk and data and what that risk means to the business and how that risk impacts your bottom line revenue and your profit margin. And that's what needs to shift and change so that you put better emphasis, having more updates and saying, hey, this is coming down the road. Yep. And how does it impact our bottom line?
Indeed. Thank you so much, gentlemen. We did have a question from the back of the room. What was the question? Yes, you, young man.
I had to gather my thoughts, so thank you for the time to do that before I had to answer the question. Here's my response to the earlier question that you posed to the audience as well as the panel. First, let me start off with the little guy, which we all were when we first started our career. We're the guy, as Mr. Johnson just espoused, that we're racking and stacking, doing all the things. Thank you. We're racking and stacking and doing all the things that we are told to do as all duties in File 13 are assigned. So, when it goes south, I have seen in my career span that sometimes the little guy gets his head cut off, even though he was following the instructions.
Yep. Chief Internal Scapegoat Officer.
Well, back in the day, those guys never left. The little guy always left. Point two, the C-level doesn't know everything. I think we all understand that. As parents, we have children that we birth into this world. There's no single book that we can read to teach us everything we need to know, to teach them so they can do all the right things in the world. There's no playbook for that. So I understand that the C-level cannot know everything. However, they hold the budget. And when you hold the budget to say yes or no, I think they need to do a better job of listening and also surrounding themselves with individuals that they can trust to do the right things. So as we have evolved slowly into the security world that we will never, ever leave because it's getting worse, the C-levels should be and always should be held accountable for the decisions for the organization. Again, they don't know everything, and no one knows, but they still have the right of refusal as time and decisions are made. However, we all buy cell phones, and I think everyone in this room probably has a cell phone. Okay. There are so many features on that cell phone that we can turn on or turn off. And we have some of those features and capabilities. We have no idea what it's going to do and what it's not going to do, such as your Log4j. So with that, again, it's just a cell phone. I can make calls, but hey, I can have a screensaver or not, or whatever the case may be that you feel that is sexy to turn on for your cell phone. But when we do, we, as the owner of that asset, is accountable for what we did turn on and what we did not turn on. And that's the same point that I'm making with the C-level. We bought the asset. We own the asset. The C-levels have the budget. They can refuse to buy X product or Y product or A product or B product or not. But someone has to be responsible, and it's not the little guy.
Yeah, I think the example of the little guy is no one's blamed the intern yet for Log4j. That's the good news. There's been no interns blamed for this one. So one final question, please, because we do have to wrap. I know several of our panel members do have to leave here.
Actually, I do have a question to the panel based on some of the conversation earlier. So a few minutes ago, we were talking about holding people accountable. Holding people accountable, and we talked briefly about Facebook being fined one day's worth of their income. Yeah. So my question goes, we have PCI, we have Sarbanes-Oxley, we have HIPAA, and my personal role, I've been an auditor in some roles, and I've seen companies that say, when you come in and you say, oh, you're in violation of this, how much is that going to cost me? Oh, $100,000, here's the check. Because they make more money and not care. So the question goes, in Europe, you can hold a CIO, you can hold a CEO liable. Are you advocating, is the panelists that are advocating holding people accountable, saying we should take the European model here and say the CEO can go to jail for 7 years and be fined $100,000 for not doing X, Y, Z? Is that what you're advocating in terms of holding accountability? And I have one last one, and this one's directly to you, Daniel. I'm sorry, only because of stuff. Palo had a vulnerability that they announced a CVE. Do you believe the company should have to disclose to other security vendors, like back in the old days when McAfee and Trend Micro and all the antivirus companies shared research to ensure protection? Do you believe that we should be back to that time of, hey, look, we have this CVE, here Trend Micro, here McAfee, here and all my competitors, how to protect it, so your customers that have us can protect?
Let me answer this one real quick because it's really easy. We do that, by the way. We're part of a consortium with Microsoft and a lot of security companies.
Yeah, that's the CyberSecurity Consortium.
That is the one.
Yeah.
So let's see. Here you go.
I do think the personal accountability should be enacted, not necessarily the company, right? It's like if you have an LLC, right? You have a separate company. The whole one of the reasons for that is because they can't come after you individually, right? So we're kind of giving that protection. But if you do, and in some cases where you saw companies that were negatively impacted, if you remember Target got the first big hit, they wiped out all of the C-level, right? And I think Equifax, that happened to them, but that was based on the board and things like that. But something like this, yeah, I do believe those individuals should be held accountable financially, and if they have to be incarcerated, and if they knowingly know, if they know that that's actually a repercussion, they may not make the decision not to buy something or not to fund somebody having another resource.
I think that if we do that, then if you think we have a shortage of cybersecurity talent now, wait till you tell them if you're breached, you're going to go to jail.
I'm not saying the CISO, I'm saying the people who are running the CLOs.
Yeah, how many of you remember the first draft of HIPAA when it came out said that the CISO could be held financially responsible for their organization? How many people remember how many CISOs left the healthcare industry when that came out? Yeah, I don't think that's the answer. Because if it's not the CISO, even if you say it's the CEO or the COO, those are the people responsible. I mean, they're making decisions based on the knowledge they have on hand, based on the experts that they have. I mean, these are all, snapshots in time. We can always look back and say you shouldn't have run that fourth down play because it didn't work. That's easy to do in hindsight. It's how do you say that they did everything they could have done to prevent this? So I think there needs to be accountability, but I think, as it was pointed out earlier, that it needs to be a group of us coming together. The federal government, private industry, it needs to be nonprofits, it needs to be everybody coming together to say what really is the best way to tackle this. How do we really think that we can put a model together? I think that the onus that we should really be focusing on, how do we punish the bad guys so that we don't make it profitable for them to do this anymore? How do we solve this from a political side, saying we can extradite these people and put them in jail? We can stop the supply chain at its source, the people who are writing the code that is being used against us. I think that's really where we need to focus. We need to really stop trying to blame each other and say that we're all fighting the same fight. Let's go after the enemy. That's just my personal opinion. I'm sure CISA has other things they'd like to say on that, but from my standpoint, I think that's what we need to focus on.
What you just said is the stand of this administration. The stand of this administration currently, from a cyber perspective, is empower the DOJ to go after cyber criminals, and they've done so. There's been more raids this year alone than ever combined on cyber criminals. And I think from a political perspective, we still haven't reached that equilibrium position. But Wes, Take us home, buddy.
First off, I'm perfectly fine with putting the CIO in jail. That doesn't bother me in the slightest. CISOs, however, are different. To James's point about budget, okay, I have a budget, and yeah, within some parameters, I can control where that money goes, but I'm not the one that came up with a budget. I mean, that money came to me from the CFO and the CEO and the board and whoever. I'm just doing the best I can with it. I agree with, I started to say prosecuting, but I'm okay with persecuting the bad guys for that matter, dropping a hellfire on them. It doesn't matter to me.
Israel did that.
Yeah.
Israel
Israel
took down the entire Hamas cyber infrastructure with 2 missiles. Cheapest operation ever.
Yeah.
Well, they're trying to classify, ransomware as a terrorist act now, so it could be that we do drop hellfire.
If you target critical infrastructure,
Yeah,
it's
if you
very important to point that out. So if you're like a SaaS organization and you go, that's an act of war. No, it's not. Sit down, go to your corner, invest in security.
Well, if you can find a good definition for what critical infrastructure is, then you can really-
There is a clear definition of critical infrastructure according to the FBI and the administration. Financial services, critical infrastructure, electric, gas, water,
there's 16 sectors.
right,
But
shipping,
is the
airlines,
supply chain of the critical infrastructure considered critical infrastructure?
Tesla. I hear Tesla's now been put in there. So,
So prosecute them, persecute them, whatever you want to do, but go after the bad guys. And yeah, if you've got a CISO or a CIO that you can show
when the
culpability for, that's a different story. But just because the guy was doing the best he could and a bad thing happened on his watch, that's a different scenario.
Look, I think there's one thing to point out about persecution, and we're gonna wrap this up here in just a moment because we are a bit over time, and everyone here has got to go. So just please, we do have to wrap up. So I'm sorry, but I will say this: the industry, from I don't work with vendors as a CISO. I work with security partners. So if we change our terminology just a little bit to start looking to each other, I have government partners like Klint over at CISO or Chad Hunt at the FBI, who I reach out to when I have challenges. They are my partners. They're not people from the government, and they're definitely, Palo Alto is not my vendor. They're my security partner. I work with them because we are partners, and it takes a village to do security like it takes a village to raise a kid, right? And if we comprehend that and we build on that trust within the community in events like this one, or if we create a monthly get-together where we are supporting that kind of vision, we tend to do more locally than we tend to look at from a federal perspective. I will tell you that I've been on several calls with Director Easterly at CISA. She has grand visions, but every time she says it, she goes, but it starts with you. It starts with you, Georgia. It starts with you, New York. It starts with you, Boston. It starts with you, San Jose. Some of the stuff that we've seen recently was the organization of city CISOs. That's now, I think, 42 cities are a part of it. That's a cybersecurity consortium of all the CISOs for 42 cities that are sharing information, collaborating with FBI, CISA, Secret Service, TSA, and much, much more. So it starts locally. If we keep looking at Klint and say, hey, Klint, take this up to CISA and help us, I'll give you an example. I got sick with COVID last year twice, but the second time we got sick, my wife and I both got it. And, we thank God we're both okay. Everything's great. And about 3.5 weeks later, after we were tested positive, the Fulton County Department of Health shows up at my door, go, hey, we wanted to come in and check up and see if you guys need anything. 3.5 weeks later. If I needed food or medicine, I'd be dead by then, right? That'd show up to a bunch of stinky bodies in my house. So don't rely on anyone else to do it for you. We have to do it ourselves. We've got to pick up the mantle, the weight. We've got to lay that path, and we've got to do it. Or we can just keep talking about it and hope it never ends. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Everyone give a hand to this esteemed panel. Thank you to Kim. And Kim's not in the room, but where's Kim? There she is. Oh, we've got a virtual question and answer.
Hold on, that's my bag of prizes.
We've got prizes?
Check.
There's prizes.
So, one question for the panel, and I'll the virtual people can hear it.
Is the answer to supply chain issue at hand AI to help to bring awareness about software inventories and consequential decisions about dealing with zero-day? Have you seen an example of successful, at least automated software asset management with AI?
So I will say that with good AI and good data science, a lot of the paper chase can be taken care of rather quickly. The question is do you build it yourself or do you buy it off the shelf? So do I think AI could absolutely help with supply chain? Yeah, if it's programmed right and its data sets are correct, then it can help with pretty much anything outside of supply chain too.
Well, I'd say certainly it can. Have I seen any of that? Nope.
I would agree with that. It's a tool, and like any tool, it can be used to do, extreme good, but it has to be implemented right, and I haven't seen anybody even targeting that yet.
I don't have anything additional to add to what the three of them said. It's exactly correct.
So this is the last question of the panel, was the one that got them all to agree. I just want to point that out, admit this was the best panel. All right, folks, give them a hand. These are awesome groups. They took the time out of your day. Thank you all for showing your awesome, lovely, amazing, smiling, magnificent faces here today. To everyone watching us online, thank you, Kim.